At 72, Susan Day has reached a point in life where memory softens sharp edges and truth no longer needs embellishment. Known to millions as the golden, poised presence on two iconic television series, The Partridge Family and L.A. Law, Day has always carried herself with restraint and dignity. For decades, she avoided revisiting the most emotionally complex chapter of her early career, her relationship with co-star David Cassidy. Fans speculated, headlines exaggerated, and time moved forward. Now, with perspective earned through decades of life, motherhood, love, and loss, Day has finally spoken with honesty about what really existed between them. Her reflections are not sensational or bitter. Instead, they offer something far rarer, a thoughtful reckoning with youth, fame, and the fragile emotions that come with growing up in public. Early life, loss, intellect, and quiet strength. Susan Day was born Susan Halleck Day on December 10, 1952, in Pekin, Illinois. Her early life carried both promise and profound loss. When Susan was young, her mother passed away, an event that reshaped her childhood and instilled a lasting emotional sensitivity. She was raised primarily by her father, a newspaper editor whose intellectual discipline and journalistic curiosity influenced Susan's thoughtful nature. The move to New York exposed her to a broader world, one filled with opportunity, but also pressure. From an early age, Susan learned to observe carefully and speak sparingly, qualities that later defined her screen presence. Before acting ever entered her life, she worked as a fashion model, appearing in teen magazines like 17. Her natural poise, intelligence, and understated beauty set her apart, quietly preparing her for a future she never planned. Becoming Lori Partridge, fame without preparation. Susan Day's life changed almost overnight when she was cast as Lori Partridge on The Partridge Family in 1970. At just 17 years old and with no formal acting experience, she stepped into a world of television schedules, studio lights, and instant fame. Lori Partridge was written as smart, kind, and musically gifted, qualities that aligned closely with Susan's real personality. Audiences responded immediately. The show became a cultural phenomenon, and Day transformed into a teen idol admired for her elegance and relatability. Yet behind the smiles and hit songs, Susan was still a teenager navigating adulthood under constant scrutiny. While fans saw confidence, she often felt uncertainty. The pace of production and the expectations placed upon her left little room for emotional processing. Fame arrived before she had time to understand herself. David Cassidy. Chemistry, friendship, and confusion. From the beginning, viewers sensed something special between Susan Day and David Cassidy. On screen, their chemistry felt natural, effortless, and emotionally sincere. Off-screen, their connection was real, but far more complicated. Cassidy, already accustomed to performance and attention, came from a well-known entertainment family. Day, by contrast, was learning everything as she went. She has since admitted that she developed a crush on him during the early seasons. He was charming, funny, and kind when she needed reassurance. But Cassidy's life outside the show was vastly different. His meteoric rise as a teen idol pulled him into a whirlwind of fans, music tours, and expectations. Their emotional worlds never quite aligned. What felt personal to Susan often felt fleeting to David, not out of cruelty, but immaturity and circumstance. Hurt feelings, and a public betrayal. One of the most painful moments Susan Day later recalled involved learning that Cassidy had publicly discussed her feelings for him in a magazine interview. To her, it wasn't rejection that hurt most, it was exposure. Something private had become a headline. As a young woman still learning to protect herself emotionally, the experience left a deep mark. She felt embarrassed and betrayed, emotions intensified by the fact that she still had to work beside him every day. Yet, she never allowed those feelings to disrupt the show. Professionalism became her shield. The Partridge Family needed to feel warm and believable, and Susan understood her responsibility to the audience. While emotional distance grew between her and Cassidy, she maintained grace on set, choosing silence over confrontation. It was an early lesson in how fame can complicate sincerity. Leaving the teen idol image behind, When the Partridge Family ended in 1974, Susan Dey made a deliberate decision to step away from that chapter of her life. Unlike Cassidy, who continued performing music tied closely to the show, Dey avoided nostalgia. She wanted to be seen as a serious actress, not a relic of teen television. The transition was not easy. Casting directors often struggled to see beyond her wholesome image. Still, Susan persisted, choosing roles that challenged expectations. In 1977's Mary Jane, Harper cried. Last night, she portrayed a young mother battling mental illness. The performance stunned critics and reintroduced her as an actress of depth and courage. It marked the moment when Susan Dey reclaimed her narrative, proving she was capable of emotional complexity far beyond her early fame. Reinvention and triumph on L.A. Law. Susan Dey's reinvention reached its peak when she was cast as Grace Van Owen on L.A. Law in 1986. The role transformed her public image completely. As a sharp, compassionate attorney who later became a judge, Dey embodied authority and intelligence with quiet power. The performance earned her a Golden Globe Award and multiple Emmy nominations. More importantly, it established her as a serious dramatic actress at a time when television was evolving. Grace Van Owen was not defined by romance or appearance, but by ethics, ambition, and emotional nuance. For Susan, the role represented personal victory. She had moved beyond the shadow of her teenage years and into a space she earned through persistence, restraint, and growth. Love, marriage, and choosing privacy. While Susan Dey's career unfolded publicly, her personal life remained carefully guarded. Her first marriage, to talent agent Leonard Hershen, offered stability during a vulnerable period, though it ultimately ended in divorce. Their daughter Sarah became Susan's emotional anchor and highest priority. Years later, she found lasting partnership with television producer Bernard Safransky. Unlike her earlier relationships, this marriage thrived away from the spotlight. Together, they built a life rooted in privacy, mutual respect, and balance. As Susan gradually stepped away from acting in the early 2000s, her focus shifted toward family and peace. Fame no longer held the same appeal. She had learned, sometimes painfully, the cost of living too visibly. Looking back on David Cassidy with compassion. In reflecting on David Cassidy later in life, Susan Dey no longer speaks with hurt, but understanding. She recognizes that both of them were young, overwhelmed, and ill-equipped to navigate fame. Over time, resentment softened into empathy. She came to see the immense pressure Cassidy carried, expectations that contributed to his struggles later in life. His death in 2017 brought unresolved feelings to the surface. Susan has expressed regret that they never had the chance to speak openly as adults. There were things left unsaid, emotions that never found resolution. Yet she honors the connection they shared. They grew up together in an extraordinary, unnatural environment, bonded by something neither fully chose nor controlled. Conclusion: truth without bitterness. Susan Dey's truth about David Cassidy is not a revelation meant to shock. It is a reflection shaped by time, maturity, and forgiveness. It speaks to the fragility of youth under fame, the misunderstandings that arise without emotional tools, and the quiet grief of unfinished conversations. At 72, Dey chooses grace over resentment. She acknowledges the joy, the pain, and the lessons without rewriting history. Her story reminds us that behind every polished television image lies a human being still learning, still feeling. In finally speaking her truth, Susan Dey offers something rare, an honest memory untouched by bitterness, honoring both what was and what might have been.